Well, I thought I'd take some time and talk about the DC animated feature, Legion of Superheroes. It's probably should have been titled Supergirl in the Legion of Superheroes because this is a Supergirl film, not so much a Legion of Superheroes film. In fact, really, other than Supergirl, there's only two other characters from the Legion that actually matter. But anyway, there was a cartoon series of Superboy in the Legion of Superheroes. I never saw it. Maybe I'll take a look at it at some point in the future when surely I'll have some time to do so. Yeah. But anyway, of course, Legion of Superheroes began with Superboy, and I was never a fan of Superboy because I didn't think that fit in with Superman's story, which is the odd thing. They never quite did it. I mean, they would just say it happened and stuff like that about Superboy. But in every origin story, it's, well, the Krypton explodes, he lands in Smallville, he's raised by the Kents, and then he goes into Metropolis and he makes his first appearance as Superman, and Lois Lane covers the story, and the rest is Superman, And so when it came to the idea of Superboy spending time in the future to be trained by other young superheroes that are, well, age-wise contemporaries of his, that I could accept. And that this is this secret adventure that no one knew about, and a bit of disturbing the timeline, really, because all his future ideas and stuff of becoming Superman is pretty much just told to him by these kids from the future. But anyway, that sort of worked. Later on, after Crisis and stuff, they changed all that, wiped it out. But then you've got this whole franchise, and what do? Do you ignore Superman's influence over it? When that's how the story originally developed and everything. So they kept trying to mess with it. And I thought the best solution was that, yeah, he's from the future. Later on, you've got these other Superboys. You've got Connor Kent and now his son. However, the idea of Supergirl going there and being amongst the Legion of Superheroes, I always thought worked a lot better. Now, originally, even before Crisis, that happened, and she developed a relationship with Brainiac and all that stuff. There was a romance between them and all that sort of stuff. But in later years, as they revamp it, and actually one of the aspects of the New 52, when they reintroduced Supergirl there was a lot about it I didn't like, but there were some things about it I thought was pretty good, especially giving her her own identity apart from Superman, which, she's a derivative character of Superman, but to give her own story because it's very different from his. And she knew Krypton. He didn't. He was a baby. And then so she's this teenage girl and she arrives on Earth and it's this backward planet to her. She's used to a futuristic world, like growing up in Star Trek. So a chance to go live in the future with the Legion that's an environment that she's very familiar with and would fit right in, which for the most part is what happens. And so that's basically the plot for this movie. And it's and that's one of the great positives of it is it does the setup where she's just not fitting in. She's not doing well, helping out Superman. There's a battle with Solomon Grundy, but Batman is like, well, she's out of control. She doesn't know what she's doing, and she's not happy about Batman's criticism, but at the same time, she understands it and begrudgingly agrees with it. He said, I just don't belong here. This isn't, I'm not familiar with this. You grew up here, so you can understand Earth better than I can, and all that sort of stuff. And Superman's sympathetic. He wants to help her out. So he comes up with the idea of going into the future and studying superheroics with the Legion of Superheroes. And there you are. So off she goes. And there is a connected plot between the two eras, but I think the main focus of it is Supergirl. Basically, at this point, it is pretty much a teenage romance romp at high school. Brainiac is pretty much like Spock. You know, there's quite the wall to get through. They don't like each other at first, but then he can't help but notice how hot she is and stuff, and then she starts to care for him. And there you go. A romance blossoms, and they have to solve a crime together and all of that sort of stuff. So it works out in the end. Mon-El, I'll just spoil it here. Of course, there was the romance between the two in the Supergirl TV show. I don't really recall anything like that happening in comic book form, at least not in the old series or anything. Maybe they've done it since. I don't know. Maybe that had more to do with the fact that the actress married the actor and all this. I don't know. But in this one, there's a brief attraction to him, but at the same time, it turns out he's the villain. Mon-El was never... I mean, unless they've rewritten him since, I don't know. But he was not a villain. He was just he became a stand-in for Superman when the Legion of Superheroes went off on their own, and had a fairly decent run until they didn't. But again, the trappings of the Legion is here, but primarily Mon-El and Brainiac 5 are the only ones that really matter here. And there's this whole plot involving the real Brainiac and so on and so forth. Won't spoil all that, but that's the Mon-El being a villain I wasn't too happy about, but for the overall plot and stuff, I guess, well, what are you going to do? But ultimately, and I know why it's done, because we're in the current era, but they do give a bit of Supergirl's origin, and she's with her mother, and there is no mention of her father. Just completely wrote him out of the story, and yet the connection between the Supergirl and Superman is that they're cousins because their fathers were brothers. So that's the family connection there. And to have him not appear is for obvious reasons. Zor-El just hasn't been treated badly. In New 52, that's one of the big things that really bothered me when they did that, was they made him the new cyborg Superman. Just like, what the hell? And I just thought it was really stupid. But they were, I think, throwing things against the wall and all that sort of stuff. So I think it's best sure, it's similar to the situation for Superman, but to change it that much is unnecessary, since Supergirl herself can have a very different approach. And the approach is it's hard for her to fit in on Earth because, again, she didn't grow up there, so it's not like it is for Clark. So it's a fairly okay romp. It's the kind of thing that probably would have worked in the old series that they did in the 90s, and stuff. Probably would have done it better. But it's okay. It's an enjoyable romp. And then there's a teaser for the next film they're going to do called War World, which I believe is already out, but I watch these when they're streaming at Max, so it'll take a while before I get to but anyway, so it's fine for the most part. They, like the downers I've mentioned, and that's about it, but it's an okay, cute little romp for Supergirl. Oh, guest starring the Legion of Superheroes.